You got any more? What? Okay. こんにちは、ようこそ、なんであれ、ようこそ. Or, hello and welcome to whatever it is that this is. Today we're going to be plugging in our very first C++ version of an audio file. It's a process that scares the crap out of people when they first start, and I want to demystify it. So first off, I'm just going to turn off some of these little widgets just to get them out of the way. But today we're going to be plugging in a very basic begin play process into this version of this 50 cents thing that's going on now. So if you hit tools and we go through the new C++ class and you don't have it, it'll mean that you'll need to generate one. Once you generate a C++ component, which we're going to do an actor component here, you'll be able to, it'll sort of re-render the whole project, especially if you're coming from Blueprint in the first place. So I'm just going to call this Awake Audio Player and kind of create new from here. This is just going to make a base class that can be added to any actor component. I'm going to make a little audio folder here as well, just to keep things neat, and it'll show you a linker error that I think is also pretty scary. The first thing to do once this opens up is just to hit build and see what happens. Generally, we'll get an error here, and it's good to sort that out before we get too deep into it. The reason we get an error is because when we look into these scripts, we see that we're referencing audio/awake audio player, which is where we created it. But when we create the header file and the C++ source file, it kind of jumps around and says like, oh, you want something within another folder, and gets a little bit confused. It's nothing too much to be worried about, but it is a core part of working in C++ is understanding what directory things are in, where your include files are. So we'll need to update the this entry, because it's going to say, hey, I can't find this audio awake audio player generated header file, and it can't find it because it doesn't exist technically. However, it does exist once we look a little deeper into the process itself. Okay, now here you can see what the problem is. I'm looking for a audio folder within the directory that we are. So if I open the Solutions Explorer here in VS Code, and then I look for where we are, and you will find that within the game, Audio Old West, and then the source folder, you'll see that we're actually within an audio file or an audio folder already. And so our first mistake is one that's generated order for us automatically. Thanks very much. So removing that, and hitting build again should give us the project, and it should now open. Now this might take a different amount of time depending on if you've compiled this before, or if your source comes from a Blueprint only project or a C++ project. Once you go C++, you can't go back, and that's fine, because it'll basically mean that you booted up from the C++ side instead of the Epic Games launcher, which is a little bit strange for some people. So what are we trying to do? Well, we're going to need to look through the header and the source file. We're going to declare what we want to do in the header, and then how we do it happens in the source file, which is the CPP version, and the header being the .h. So the first thing we're looking to do is make an actor, which is where are we going to play this sound from. So I'm going to write a little comment here, and then we're going to need a sound to contextualize what sound should be playing from a different location. Now, these come from a place called Kismet Gameplay Statics, which is just used a part of Epic Games' library for the content for where they use sound bases. So if I open up Kismet, I can see the sound base here, and we'll see things like audio components as well. And it's an important part of kind of taking into the package the code that you're looking to use, so that we can get all this access to all the code that's been written for Epic, because this is where all the functionality comes from, so that we don't have to write it ourselves. So for us here, we're going to use an actor. Specifically, we're going to use a pointer to an actor, and that's maybe less important. We're not creating an actor, but we're pointing to an actor, and that's a little bit confusing over time. But we're just going to call it actor target, and then we'll also need a sound, like I said, and that'll be the sound base. Now, this will be able to take in meta sounds and sound cues, and we could contextualize this to be a sound cue specifically or not, and that's not really important right now. What we are going to do is just hit build again, just to be sure that we have spelt everything correctly before we go on and implement the behavior that we're looking to implement. So holding Control Shift Tab will open up the current files that I have in VS Code, and I'm going to go across to the source file now, so that I can look at what these different settings are. So there's a constructor here, which is what happens when the thing is created in the first place, and then a begin play, which is kind of similar to the begin play that we've seen in blueprints already, and a tick component, which is the tick of it updating every frame like we have seen already. So I'm just going to trigger this within the begin play. First up, we're just going to check if there is a sound to play, and if there is a sound to play and a target, then we will play something. We want to be really careful that we have a position already, and we have where we're going to play something and what we're going to play, because calling things otherwise has errors. So we're going to use this functionality called play sound at location. We can use play sound 2D as well for like UI clicks and one shots and things like that, but we will aim to kind of use this as a good entry point or as a kicking off point to doing things that are localized as well. So play sound at location has some arguments. We can see it's asking, hey, I need an object, which we're going to say this. We need a sound, which we're going to say our sound to play. And we need a location, which we're going to say our actor. Well, not quite. We're going to say our actor, but we're going to get the actor's location because it's not asking for an actor. It's asking specifically for an F vector, which will be a struct that's a little bit different from an actor. So if we dive into the actor itself, we're going to say, hey, I need an F vector from this actor. So start sort of looking around for it. In this instance, you can see that there's quite a lot of functionality. The actor class is pretty large, and it's not to be taken too lightly. So I'm going to start looking with the alt \, which shows searches through members, and I'm going to look for location. I'm going to find get actor location. So once I have found this get actor location, that's what I'm going to use. Because it's a pointer, I'm going to use this arrow to point again afterwards to this functionality and call get actor location. With this, we actually have everything we already need. So booting this up again and running our functionality with the F5 command or hitting the run command if you haven't used VS that much. Assuming you've typed everything in correctly, you should have your very first version of a C++ command. Now, what does this look like? Well, we can go to the static mesh that we have and click add and click new component and start looking for our audio component, which we called awake audio player. And you'll see, oh, there's no where to put a specific sound and there's nowhere to set up a specific actor. And that's because of a concept that Unreal calls properties. Properties are the sort of front-facing or forward-facing or user-facing, I should say, ways of a user that uses the tool that we're making here to consume that tool and contextualize it. There's a little bit of syntax here, but you'll use it a lot. So we're going to use this macro called uProperty. We're going to write edit anywhere, blueprint rewrite, and the category being audio. This category means nothing other than a text formatting thing, but the edit anywhere and blueprint rewrite are a little bit special. Holding control and clicking on one of those gets me to this file that has all of the different props that I can add, whether they're replicated or not, whether they're global or const, or whether they're accessible to Blueprint or not accessible to Blueprint. And you'll see it's a layer on top of the public-private versus sort of similar to how you would maybe serialize fields in Unity and contextualize those fields to be used in different ways as well. So if you're coming from Unity and you're used to like the serialized field bracket, that's kind of what we're doing here. When we look at the category, we can see that is a param category, which kind of goes a little bit deeper into Unreal, and it starts to get a little bit funky once you trackle down a little bit. But for the most part, that's the whole part of the macro that we need. So I'm going to write out the version for the sound base as well. I'm going to keep these pretty simple, being edit anywhere, blueprint read write, and the category being the same. And once we save and rebuild this time, we should be able to see entries for where we can add a sound base and where we can add an actor location so that we'll be able to start playing our audio. Now again, this build process is very normal. You won't find many Unreal Engine projects that are entirely built in Blueprint that never touch C++. So if you've never installed VS Visual Studio before, let me know if that's something that we should be covering as well. So we can see that I have this sound to play, which I'm going to put this beautiful sound of a horse, and then I can either select an actor from the drop down, use select an actor from the viewport, or select an actor from the scene itself. So I'm going to click the select an actor from the scene itself, and then just click on my sign. Now this won't be spatialized correctly because I haven't added attenuation, but if it were, it would trigger in the right location. It is triggering from there. At the moment, it's triggering 2D, which you'll see if I open up the sound base itself and scroll down to where there are attenuations, then I could add an attenuation. So I'm going to use my small attenuation fields here, and then I'll be in a position where it plays from that space, which in this instance, would be too far away. So I could put a looping sound or something here as well. That's it. That's all it takes to get your first sound working in C++ from Unreal Engine. It is a very deep process that continues to evolve with your understanding of audio and sound and Unreal Engine in general, but it is very lucrative in terms of great sound opportunities and cool functionality that you maybe are not used to from the Blueprint side. And it actually empowers your Blueprint logic as well. So thanks for sticking by, and I'll catch you next time.